Hey, hello friends. Last video we learned about how to do the installation of Linux servers, then add new hard disks and that hard disk entry add into the fstab file system. So today we learn about the beginning level interview question of Linux servers. First, we see about file system hierarchy of Linux servers. After the installation of Linux servers, we found that the one file system hierarchy under the slash. So first we see about the slash, then see about root file system, home, boot, sbin, bin, usr, where, dev, etc, proc, temp, opt, media and lib file system. These are the file system present under the Linux servers. You can see this file system after the installation. So let, let's talk about let's take the details about that file system. First slash this directory is called as root directory. It is the top of the file system structure. All other directories are mounted under it. Root. This is the default home directory of the administrator. Slash home. It contains all users' home directories. Means, suppose you create a new user. After that, once the user creation is done, you can found one directories under the slash home directory with his username slash boot. This directory store the kernel information and kernel related booting files, such as the bootloader and the initial RAM disk. So everybody knows how to do the installation of Linux servers. So you can found these directories under the slash, means once you go cd space slash and hit the enter, that time you want to do ls-lrth. After that you can found the slash root, home and boot directories under the slash. Go to the next, sbin. It contains administrative command used by the super user. Slash bin. This directory contains command used by the super and normal users. Slash usr. It contains the program and application which are available for users. Slash var. It contains variable information such as logs and print queues. Next, dev. This directory contains device nodes through which operating system can access hardware and software devices on the system. Means under the slash dev you can found the entry about the hard disk, means slash dev slash sda sdb hdc. These entries you can found under the slash dev directory. Slash etc. It contains all configuration files. Means suppose you install any kind of software packages like SSH, Nginx or HTTPD. So that package related configuration files present under slash etc directory. Slash proc. This directory is mounted or mount point for virtual information about currently running system process. This directory is empty until the proc file system is mounted. This is a virtual directory slash temp. This directory contains temporary file used by the system administrator or any other users. When machine reboot, all temporary files are deleted. So be careful when you copy or move any critical file. So make sure you can take a backup of that file to the another directory or another file system, because when you reboot that machine, so your file will be deleted. Slash opt, it contains the third party applications, means JBoss, WebLogic, and etc. So these kind of application you can set up into the opt directories. Media, it contains default mount point of removable media such as CD-ROM, floppy disk, and pen drive. You, you guys know about the media. Media is kind of your CD-ROM, floppy disk, and pen drive. Slash lib, it contains library need by number of different application as well as Linux kernel. Slash lib directory store the application related directories or application related files. That files or that libraries are very important according to the Linux kernel or according to the application. So here are different types of firmware in Linux server: BIOS and UEFI. BIOS. BIOS use MBR partition table. It supports four primary partitions. UEFI is a modern firmware. It supports GPT partition table and 128 primary partition. It supports the secure boot. You can also check which kind of BIOS present into the your Linux server with the help of bootctl status command. Now, after finish the types of BIOS, we learn about what is a bootloader. A bootloader is a small program that start your Linux OS when you power on the computers. Think like the starter of your bike or car. Without it, the engine will not start. Same like your bootloader is a small program. If bootloader not start, your Linux machine will not start. What does a bootloader do? Simple word. When you turn on your computer, BIOS or UEFI BIOS, wake up the hardware, search and load the bootloader from the disk. Means load the Linux kernel, load the init and finally start the Linux operating system. So bootloader is very important key factor into the Linux. Without bootloader, Linux, without bootloader, you can't load the Linux kernel, initramfs files. With the help of this, you can start your Linux server. So, the bootloader is the middle person between BIOS and the Linux kernel. Example of bootloader means there are two types of bootloader. GRUB, this is used most commonly in Red Hat, Ubuntu and CentOS system. And Lilo. Lilo is the older one, not used now. But if you install the older version of operating system like CentOS 6.5 or RHEL 6 or RHEL 5, so that time you can find the Lilo bootloader. And in modern system means like RHEL 7, 8 or any higher version of OS of Linux server, you can find the grub2 bootloader. Main important bootloader files. So here is slash boot grub2 and grub.cfg. This is the main important bootloader file. This is the interview question. If someone asks you what is the main important bootloader file, so your answer is slash boot grub2 slash grub.cfg. And what that file will work. So this file work or this file store the menu entries, kernel path, timeout and themes. These entries the bootloader file store. The most important file, you should not edit it manually. Means the bootloader file you should not edit manually. It is auto generated. Suppose if you edit this file manually and reboot the system, so you can face that your Linux server not up, means your Linux server not started. It shows the bootloader file entries error. So be careful when you edit the bootloader files. There are different types of file system in Linux server. ext4, xfs, btrfs. If someone asks you, I want to check which type of file system present in my Linux server. So your answer is df-th command. This is an interview question. Interviewer asks many times, ki, tell me the command. I want to check which type of file system I am using in Linux server. So your answer is df-capital th command. Capital T means type of the file system and H means human readable format. So here are some details about the file system. First, ext4. This is the older but reliable file system. In some simple word, very stable, works everywhere, good for small and medium servers, and best for normal Linux installation, small applications, and home system, and not good for very large environment you cannot use ext4 file system, and heavy input output workloads, you cannot use it. XFS. XFS is a faster and best for large servers. In simple words, very fast with large file, handles high input output load, used in enterprise like RECL servers. Best for databases, big file storage, and production servers. Not good for shrinking file system, means cannot reduce the size. Suppose in XFS file system, you configure the LVM and you want to reduce some size of amount disk into the XFS file system. So technically it is not possible to reduce the XFS file system. BTRFS. This is the modern and advanced file system. In simple word, new advanced file system can take a snapshot, build in RAID options, best for testing environment, workload needing snapshot, containers, home lab. Not good for very large enterprise production, not as stable as XFS for heavy workload. So these are the types and details about the file system. I hope you can understand. Going forward, suppose your bootloader is going to corrupt, or your bootloader is corrupt when you start your Linux servers. So how do you fix the grub bootloader? So there are small steps to recover the grub bootloader. First, you have to attach your DVD to your Linux server. Then boot using RECL DVD. Then go to the rescue mode. After that, type chroot/mnt sysimage command. After type that command, you can install the grub2-install/dev/hda command. With the help of this, you can fix your grub bootloader. Then grub2-make config-o /boot/grub2/grub.chd. With the help of this command, you can update your grub file, then reboot the Linux server. After reboot the Linux server, you can fix your grub bootloader problem. Now, in last lecture, we talk about when we reboot the machine, our newly added mount point has been removed. Why this mount point would be removed? Because after adding the new hard disk, we have not added that entry into the /etc fstab file. So, what is /etc fstab file? Fstab file used for permanent mounting. Fstab is a file that stores automatic mount information for the disk, partition, and network file system. So, another interview question is, what is fstab file? So, your simple answer is Use for permanent mounting. That's it. Then, what are the fields present into the fstab file? So, there are 6 fields present into the fstab file. Another interview question. And this question interviewer must ask. So, the answer is there are 6 fields present in fstab file. First one, device name. Second, mount point. Third, file system type. Fourth, mount option. Fifth, dump value. Sixth, FSCK check. This is your answer. What is mount option? Many interviewer ask the fourth option, what is the mount option? So your answer is this is a parameter that specifies how a file system or device should be accessed, or controlling things like read write, permissions, security, settings, and performance. Means your answer is it specifies the file system or device should be accessed, controlling things like read write permissions, security setting, and performance. This is your answer. So, what kind of mount option present? So, there are few options are present like read write RW, SUID, dev, exec, auto, no user, and async. These are the mount options. Now, what is initramfs and why do we use initramfs in a Linux? Initramfs is a temporary root file system that Linux load into RAM during boot before the real root file system is mounted. Means this is a temporary file system and it is load into the RAM during the boot process. During the boot process, initial init RAM disk temporary mounted. Why do we use initramfs in Linux? Because we use it, the kernel alone cannot build the system. The kernel needs driver and tools to access HDD, LVM, RAID, file system, network drivers. These drivers required are placed inside initramfs. So the system can load hardware and storage before mounting /boot. So this is a simple things to do initramfs. Now, without initramfs and with initramfs, what happened? Without initramfs, kernel cannot find your device, that is /dev/sda or LVM device. Means if initramfs cannot find your device, so there is a boot failure. Means your Linux server not start. And with initramfs, kernel load disk driver means find a root file system. That time your boot works means your Linux server start. When is initramfs used? During system boot means every time after kernel upgrade, when adding a new storage driver, when using LVM, RAID, ISCSI encrypted disk for recovery mode, that is bracket chain. That time init ramfs use. There are some commands to related init ramfs. To view current init ramfs file, go to the cd/boot directory. In that directory, you can do ls-lrth command. After that, you can find the initramfs.img file. To regenerate the initramfs, you have to use bracket-f command. That command works into CentOS, RHEL, and Rocky Linux. To generate initramfs for Ubuntu and Debian, you use update-initramfs-u command. With the help of you can regenerate the initramfs file system. Now, there is a scenario based question. Every interviewer asks you, suppose I have a hard disk and I want to format this disk and mount it to the slash data directory. How do I do this? In last video, we saw we attach one hard disk to the Linux servers, and after adding this hard disk, we can found that hard disk into our Linux server. Then we format this disk, then mount this disk into the one file system. So same scenario based question interviewer ask you. So our answer is, with the help of fdisk utility, you can create and modify the partition. Once your storage administrator assign the external HDD to your Linux server, then you have to list the disk with below commands. Means in last video, we attached 150 GB hard disk to our Linux servers. After that, we list all disks with the help of lsblk or fdisk-l command. After that, we found that disk, that is /dev/hdb. Open the disk in fdisk utility, fdisk/dev/hdb. Once you enter, you can type the m command, m for the help. With the help of this, you can create a new partition, hyphen n option, then p for print, d for delete, t for change the partition type, w for write, q for quit. So for create a new partition, we use n option, then choose p for primary, then we give the partition number 1, first sector press enter, and last sector press enter. Why? Because we have to use the full disk. For that, we just enter for first sector and enter for the last sector. Then save the partition table with the help of W command. These write changes to the disk. Then rescan the partition table with the help of part-pro command. With the help of this command, there is no need to reboot the system. Then format the partition. So there are two types of file system. Earlier we discussed ext4 and xfs. Suppose your partition or your file system type present in ext4, so you can use mkfs.ext4 slash dev slash hdb1. Or suppose your Linux server use XFS file system, then you can use mkfs.xfs slash slash dev slash hdb command. With the help of this, you can format your hard disk. Then create a one mount point with the help of mkdir command. Mkdir slash data. After that, mount the partition. Mount this partition with the help of mount command, mount slash dev slash hdb1 and your mount directory slash data. To verify your disk is mounted to the partition, use fdisk, use df-h or df-th command. After verify your file system successfully mounted over the directory, then for permanent mounting, we go to the slash etc fstab file, and inside this we add the hard disk entry, that is slash dev slash hdb1 device name, then mount point slash data, then file system type ext4 or xfs, then mount option your default, then dump value 0 and fsck 0. Then we apply mount-a command. Why we use mount-a command? Because when you hit this command, suppose any abnormal activities or any misadding sentence is present inside the slash etc fstab file. So you can found the error and fix that error before rebooting the Linux server. No. The very important topic is boot process. Interviewer asks many times, what is the boot process of Linux server? So today we cover the boot process of the Linux server in simple way. When you power on the Linux server, first start the SMPS. Then SMPS convert AC to DC power supply. After that, provide power goods signal to the motherboard timer chip. After providing the signal, CPU ready to process the instruction to the BIOS. So we discuss about the BIOS. There are two types of BIOS, UEFI and MBR BIOS. UEFI BIOS use GPT partition and MBR BIOS, sorry, normal BIOS use MBR partition. MBR create 4 primary partition and GPT create 128 primary partition. In CentOS or RHEL Linux, UEFI BIOS came to the picture because the system architecture or hardware changes. Now you guys knows very well there are lots of changes into the hardware from last 5 years. Earlier we work over the RHEL 6 or RHEL 6.5. This is the older operating system. Now The current operating system is going on RHEL 10. This is the latest version of the RHEL operating system. So, the latest version of the operating system means there are latest kernel present. So, as per the kernel, the hardware has been changed. After that, BIOS call to the GRUB. So, we also talk about the GRUB. There are two types of GRUB. One is Lilo and another one is GRUB2. So, BIOS call to GRUB and GRUB call to the kernel. Why GRUB call to the kernel? Because GRUB read configuration file to reach the kernel. GRUB call to the slash boot means GRUB read the configuration file to reach the kernel. After that, GRUB call to the slash boot file system and boot call to the VM Linux to load the kernel. Then kernel call to the systemd. Though systemd in new operating system, kernel call to the systemd. Kernel store in slash boot. When kernel load all the drivers and the kernel communicate with the application. Means when kernel load all these drivers, that time kernel communicate with the applications. It is load into the RAM. Means kernel load into the RAMs. You can check with the help of ls mode command, rm mode and ins mode means insert mode. These are the commands. Rm means to remove the module. Then systemd get one process ID. When kernel call to systemd get one process ID. Then systemd first call to default.target and graphical.target files. After called systemd call to default and graphical.target file. That file you can found in cd/usr/bin/cd/usr/lib/system/system/graphical.target. Then graphical.target file decide which process start after and before and which service is required and wants. Then systemd call to ageti. Ageti call to login shell means has been ageti and that login shell call to /dev tty1 etc issue and bin login file. Once the user provide the username and password, after that login file call to where spoolmail etc motd where log last log and bin bash file. Then /bin/bash file call to /etc profile etc bash rc till.bash rc. That three file call to bin bash file. So what is the purpose of that file? /etc profile run for all users when they log in. It is use SSH terminal login and console log. Then etc bash rc run every time any users open a new terminal tab or run a bash script. It's run every time for any user slash etc bash rc. Till.bash rc affects only the current user. Means for current users, you can set your bash rc commands so you can use till slash dot bash rc file. When you open a new terminal window for your own dot bash rc runs. So these are the boot process. We can talk little deeply. If you have any doubts regarding of the boot process, so you can contact or you can message me. Now there are little or some interview questions. We also see about difference between BIOS and UEFI BIOS. Why we use FS tab? What happen if GRUB is corrupted? This is a simple activity when your GRUB is corrupted. Difference between ext4 and XFL. What is USR was USR local. USR means when you install any kind of application, so that application related file or libraries goes to slash USR directory. Or you can install any third party application, so that application related libraries file goes to USR local directories. Then we talk about what is minimal installation. In first video, we discuss about what is minimal installation. So everyone know about that video and that details. Now, what is init ramfs? That is most important question interviewer asks. Then how to check boot modes. Then what is your boot? What is the boot process? This is the beginner level interview question. If you prepare this question, I hope you can prepare 25% of Linux server interview questions. So, thank you. Have a nice day. I hope you enjoy this session.